Welcome to Eureka. I'm Gauhar Raza and you are watching Eureka. Today we have a remarkable scientist with us, Dr. Suresh Das, who is Director of National Institute of Interdisciplinary Science and Technology. What is this interdisciplinary all about? Why do you need interdisciplinary research in the society? There was a period when science was compartmentalized, divided into small sections. But now today, the fashion is to do interdisciplinary research. Why do you require that? Why there is shift?
Yeah, I wouldn't know if you could call it a fashion, but I think it is definitely the need of the hour. If you really want to get anything accomplished, you cannot talk only purely based on scientific principles. You need to take those principles, apply them to systems, and take them all the way to the systems where they become actually relevant. And here you will need a combination of people with different skills, those who understand the underlying principles of the science in any system. How would you take that forward?
Take some example to explain the point.
So in our, for example, when I took over the institute, we had about 5 divisions in our organization.
Right.
And I've just named them. We have, for example, the Chemical Sciences and Technology Division, the Material Sciences and Technology Division. Then we have a Process Engineering Division, a Biotechnology Division. So these were all divisions which were working on programs, in a kind of an isolated. Each one had very successful programs. But in order to take something right onto the field, I found that it was necessary for people to
talk to each
other. And so our first attempt was to try and be true to our name. So the name of our institute had been changed in 2004 it was called as the National Institute for Interdisciplinary Science and Technology. So I told our scientists that at least let us try to be true to the name. So we tried to blur the boundaries between these divisions. And so, I'm very happy to state that today that has happened, and there is a seamless movement of scientists and students across these different divisions. So, and I don't need to push it any further. So, just to give an example, we have my own area of interest is in photochemistry, and we've been for a long time working on the fundamental aspects of photochemistry. And recently now we have a group in the Material Science Division which has taken up those aspects, and we have developed very good coating materials where you actually, they are self-cleaning surfaces.
Substances. Yes, so tomorrow I don't have to wear a shirt which I need to probably wash every day.
Those are applications, but not the ones that we have been looking at. We have been looking at mostly on surfaces, on tiles, for example, and also on roofing tiles, for example. Also, we are also interacting, for example, with BHEL. They have a large program on photovoltaics. Bharat Heavy Electricals, where they have a huge program on photovoltaics. And one of the major problems on photovoltaics is that the surface gets covered by dust, and you need surfaces which are self-cleaning.
Right.
And this is a major challenge, and our scientists are working on this. So here you have an example of an interaction of engineers from BHEL.
Right from fundamental research to applied research to technology development, and then innovation in the field of...
So any innovation would require that kind of interdisciplinary interaction.
Right.
And so...
but let me take you back to memory lane. Your institute was not an institute in the beginning. It was a testing laboratory.
Very true.
From there, it has come to a big institute which is internationally recognized today. You have grown with the institute. So how do you look back at the history of the institute and history of India? Because India was being shaped by such institutes. How do you look at that?
I think you have very nicely put it. Actually, I joined the institute in '89. The institute actually started in '78, about more than 10 years before me. So if you look at the history of our institute, actually in 1972, our chief minister at that time, Achyuta Menon, had talked to the DG of CSIR, and that Nayadoma was the DG at that time. So he was interested in starting a CSIR laboratory in our state. And he was a very forward-looking chief minister.
And CSIR was already a very big
organization. In fact, we are a fairly young institute if you look at the history of CSIR. And so at that time, they took that initiative, and we had a CSIR complex, which was looked after maybe by the CFTRI, at the Central Food and Technology Research Institute at that time.
Which is located in Chennai.
In Mysore.
In Mysore.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
and so Dr. Amra was looking after it.
Right.
And then finally it became a full-fledged regional research laboratory. Professor Rohatgi was the first director. That happened in 1978. And if you really look back at the phenomenal growth that institute has had, from, as you rightly mentioned, from a testing laboratory to what it is today, it has...
this growth is almost synchronized with the growth of the nation.
Very true, yes, you can see that, and I think people tend to underestimate the transformation that our country has gone through, and also the significant role that science has played parallelly. In fact, the kind of interactions we have had with our own home state has been tremendous, and our institute is appreciated for the kind of contributions that it has made at the regional level. And so, of course, subsequently, as you mentioned, it became nationally recognized, and that was when we changed our name to the National Institute for Interdisciplinary Science and Technology around 2004.
It was a regional research laboratory for quite some time, and then
yes.
It became the institute. It was given the institute. Let's go back to the memory lanes of your childhood. Your father was a civil engineer. Your mother was a very, very creative person, and she told you stories.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Stories that I know. Yeah. While researching on your personality, I came to know of these facts. How was mother's influence, and how did your creativity got unleashed because of those creative stories that your mother told you? Was it influence of mother, or was it influence
I would say
of
both.
father?
My mother was, of course, a very good storyteller. In fact, she used to, even today when I communicate with her, very often, even in a small phone call, she can sometimes relate things based on something based on stories. So it's something that comes very naturally to her. And in fact, both my parents, one of the things that I felt as I was growing up was that they stressed more on value systems rather than personal success. And this was a message that we used to get throughout. And I used to, for example, there were many times when my mother used to talk appreciatingly about what my father did in the office. And very often it was not about, his professional success, or rather it was how
but
he
the value systems that he was using to achieve.
Yeah, so that
he was a dam builder, civil engineer, and that was remarkable.
So that used to
you grew up looking at dams being built. We'll come back to that. I have to take a break at the moment. Keep watching Eureka. Welcome back to Eureka. We were discussing with Dr. Suresh Das, who is a fascinating and one of the most brilliant scientists in the country, and a very successful technologist. We were exploring the memory lanes of your childhood. Your father was a civil engineer and he was building dam when you were a small child. So on the one hand, you had direct touch with technology and big technology of that time. And on the other hand, you were saying that you had very intense feed from your mother as far as culture is concerned. Do you remember some of these stories which intensely affected you?
Most of the stories were based on mythology, and I mentioned about my mother being creative. She was also a Kathakali dancer. So she could relate these stories, through this, the description of this art form. And very often these
and you
characters...
used to go to
very often, yes.
Performances?
Saw many performances. In fact, we used to travel. Most of my schooling was done in Pune. And we had to travel sometimes all the way to Bombay to see some performances.
But you started in Delhi, your life.
Yes,
you opened your eyes as a child in Delhi and then moved to...
Then moved on to... But I was too young to remember too many details about my life in Delhi. I remember most of what happened, so much of my schooling was in Pune, and my college was also in Pune. So I studied in Ferguson College. So I remember Pune better as actually the city that I have most familiar with. And in fact, we used to have Kathakali programs that I remember in Bombay, and we used to travel just all the distance to see this. And this had a very good impact, very strong impact.
But your father was your probably role model.
Yes.
And he was a civil engineer. Yeah. But you chose chemistry because of intense, again, impression by a teacher in the school.
True, because I never felt any kind of pressure from either of my parents on to.
They didn't?
No, there was.
They
never,
didn't want you
I-
to be engineer?
I know. I'm sure he would have been happy if I had been. There was no kind of pressure on what I need to do. So they used to just show me kind of opportunities. But I think interest in chemistry actually came, I would say, in school when we had a very particularly good chemistry teacher. I would still remember him, Sir Dhawle. And if I were to say something interesting, that he used to talk about subjects which were not actually in the textbook. And curiously, I would even mention about the fact that once he talked to us about a very interesting photochemical chain reaction of chlorine,
Okay.
which is something that we didn't have to learn about. And for me, that was really fascinating.
school?
In school. And not in the classroom, but just outside, we were talking about it.
Because that at that time probably was the latest science.
Probably would
It
have
was
been.
cutting edge science.
Yes.
It was chlorine
Yes.
and its photochemical reaction.
Yes. What fascinated me there was actually that you could use light to carry out a chemical reaction. That at that time in school it was fascinating.
Yeah, which
The other-
ultimately results into that photochromatic lens.
Yes, there are so
that
many
we have
applications
today
yes. Sure,
in the
for
market.
Sure, yes, and the other thing is that chain reaction. So when you combine these two together, it was a concept. Both these concepts were very new to me, and it's curious that today, when I am talking about my own specialty, happens to be in photochemistry, and we are
I
designing.
hope that teachers are listening. I hope that the students are listening. That what intense impact that can be created by a good teacher on a student, and for the nation, a teacher could produce a first-rate scientist and technologist. Yeah, please do continue.
No, I would say that teachers have played a very important role throughout my career, and their faith in me is what has helped me to want to do well.
But suddenly your father is transferred from India and you land up in Iraq as a child. What was this transformation? What did it do to you?
I was also a fascinating transformation.
Alienated,
Not-
a completely alien language.
Yes, yeah. Actually, I was by that time I had finished my undergraduate degree, and I was actually visiting him on holiday. But a chance visit to the University of Baghdad at that time, I met a very fascinating character. I would say one Professor Ghazi Darwish.
Yes.
His personality impressed me. He was a very tall person with a very booming voice, and somehow he took a very great liking to me. And was, what fascinated me about him was that he was a spectroscopist. And I happened to see some textbooks in which his names were printed. And for a young master student, to see your professor's name in a textbook was something which
Yes.
was like you think that he is, somebody very special. And he took a liking to me because as a spectroscopist, he knew about C.V. Raman, and Raman spectroscopy was something that he was fascinated about. And he looked at me as an Indian coming from that land. And so he took a very special liking to me. And he treated me at that age, even as an MSc student, he treated me like as if I was already an accomplished scientist. And this boosted my confidence a lot. And I think it was at this stage that I really decided, because till that time I was not very clear on what I wanted to do with my choose as a career. And the interaction with Professor Ghazi Darwish at that time, and the importance that they gave to science actually in those days in Iraq, the scientists were respected a lot more.
How did you decide to go to the West now from Iraq for your PhD?
Curiously, I told you Professor Ghazi Darwish was so happy with me, he had actually offered me a job in the ministry. That is when I had also applied for a PhD in the University of Newcastle upon Tyne. And since I had this job, I was very reluctant to tell him about this, because he had gone out of his way to get me this job. When I told him, he said, you should go immediately. He says, this is peanuts. What is waiting for you is much. He had great faith in me, I must say.
That
and even
was
today,
the
I remember
final support.
Yes, and so he
from a
was,
teacher.
so he was almost telling you should fly. And teachers like this make a huge impact, as you rightly mentioned, and we are forever grateful to them.
You do your research in the West and then suddenly decide to come back to India. Why did you do that? You could have continued there.
Yes, a lot of people have asked me this question, but somehow this doubt was never in my mind. I was always quite clear that I was going to come back to India. I have no idea where I was coming, because I had all my postgraduate education abroad. But the question about coming back to India was never a matter of doubt. It was just only
You
when
always
knew that I was
wanted
going
to serve
and that
the
was
country.
for sure. I don't know if that was what was driving me. I really wanted to come back and work in my country. And
No,
hopefully,
was it because of the culture? Was it because of the value system? Was it because of the love for the country? What was the reason?
I would say a combination of all these facts. I really wanted to do something for the country, but I did not know if I was in a position to do something at that stage. But I really did want to come back and teach. As I said, I had understood.
Oh, you wanted to be a teacher?
Yes, I did want to come back and teach because of the kind of what I had gained in my life through these teachers is something that I really wanted to give back. And I had at that time kind of imagined that I would come back, work in a research organization and actually also teach. So this was something that I had hoped for, but I didn't have any contacts at that time. But I was sincerely trying. I did get a visiting position at the Tata Institute for Fundamental Research.
You wanted to teach, but you come back to a research institute, which was first-rate research institute. It still happens to be one of the best institutes in the country. Was there a cultural difference between the way science was being done in the West and TIFR?
TIFR, of course, was is a world-class institute, and the science done there is as good as what it is done internationally, anywhere in the world. And so, of course, there is, if you look at in India, there is still quite a bit of gap in the way we approach science. And one of the reasons is that, of course, as a developing country, very often we choose a profession based on our economic needs rather than passion.
Right.
And so therefore what I found in the West was...
And the wishes of the parents.
And the wishes of the parents. So very often what I find is that some of the best students fail to come into the realm of science. And in spite of that, of course, we have a very good number of very good scientists working in the country. But I think the situation would be different if people who were really passionate about the subject actually, we were able to attract these kind of people into this profession. And
you have always held that science is a collaborative endeavor. And you keep on repeating that a good researcher is a good collaborator. How much have you been able to implement that in your institute as a culture of doing science?
I would say that if I were to take credit for anything about our organization, this would be one aspect. Because right from day one when I became the director, this is what I want. I simply made it, the statement that the name of our institute happens to be National Institute for Interdisciplinary Science and Technology. Let us try to be true to that name. And as we rightly pointed out in the beginning, you cannot focus on one specific subject and then bring about any kind of value-based technology at the end. So here you need people talking, even if you're doing, I have found that I am a basic researcher in the area of photochemistry and liquid crystals. Even in a specific area like this, I have found great value in collaborating with scientists from either from the Center for Liquid Crystal Research in Bangalore or other collaborators in Japan. So these ideas, mixing of ideas between different people, brings great value to you.
See, at one level, this is high-level, cutting-edge technology that you are working at. Liquid crystal still remains a hot area of science. Thin films is an area which is contributing greatly, and it has to have a deep root into fundamental physics and chemistry both. At one level, you are doing that in your institute. At another level, you are able to give to the nation a technology where the fake note can be identified. So, do you think, which I believe in, is correct, that when scientists are called upon to solve a simple problem, then society has to put that request to them and they will be able to crack. Unless and until you are doing fundamental science, you will not be able to solve these easy problems. Would you agree with that?
I fully agree with your argument in the sense that that is precisely what we do in our institute. Say if a new young scientist joins our laboratory, the advice I give to him is that I would like you to develop your own area of research, become internationally recognized, nationally, internationally recognized. So that develops a kind of a core strength within the kind of areas that we are interested in. Then subsequently, we also encourage him now to interact with others, either within the institute or from outside the institute, and with end users like the industry or the government or the so-called needy sectors, societally needy sectors. So there, where the
Would you give an example of a project that your institute is doing, which has directly benefited the society, other than this note?
I can give you several examples. I will just one particular example. You'll be happy to notice that some of our scientists have developed a technology for extracting fiber from pineapple leaf. And pineapple is grown extensively in Kerala, and there are and many of them farms are done by there's a ladies association called the Kudumbashri. So there are many women employed in this.
Yep.
And traditionally, you will be interested to know the way they got rid of these pineapple leaves was because of the water. The water content was high. So they used to soak them in pesticide, let them dry, and then burn them. So you can imagine the kind of damage it does to the environment. Now here, our scientists have developed a bioprocess by which you can extract fiber out of this, and one of the byproducts is biogas.
It's the society which has put a demand on you, and your institute has stood up to the reputation and have solved the problems. I would have liked to continue the discussion. It is fascinating to know about how science and technology has been the basis for development of our country, and that's why we are in the forefront of at least developing countries. Would you like to give a message to the younger generation that is close to your heart?
I would say that if there is any message that I would like to give, it is to follow your passion. Finally, when you have to choose whatever the profession, as I said, we would like to see young people come into science, but that should be your first passion. And if you have people following their passion, rather than needs, societal demands, I would say, I think you will be able to contribute better to society. And here we are looking for young children who are fascinated by what science does. And in fact, my fascination for science has been, one of the inspirations has been looking at nature. And when you look at nature, you get the kind of things that whatever technology you talk about today, much of it already exists in nature. You mentioned about the photochemistry and our ability to see. So like that, there are examples of devices all over nature. So it's a profession. If one is passionate about science and chooses this as a profession, I can tell any young man that he would do well, and there are opportunities plenty for somebody like that to do well.
Look at the nature, be passionate, and do science. That is the basis of development of not only your country, your society, but the entire humanity. That is the message that I get from talking to you. It has been a wonderful session with you.
Pleasure talking to you.
Goodbye to you, and goodbye to all of our viewers as well.